This is a 2003 Honda Silverwing. This is an historic bike, and it's kind of an interesting bike. I don't think a lot of people realize it because they don't have that many of these, and of course they don't make it anymore. But Honda, the Silverwing started out as a CX500, GL500 Silverwing. So in the beginning, it was a motorcycle, the Silverwing name, and eventually became a scooter because it's an automatic. And if you're interested in getting a DCT, you might want to consider the Honda Silverwing. This is their largest engine, and 600 cc's with a parallel twin engine, extremely smooth, and it's also a competitor to the Suzuki Burgman 650. The 650 though from Suzuki is much larger than this one. It's got a very different appeal. You don't get this bike for commuting. You get this because you want to do a little bit more touring on top of your commuting. This one is perfect for that. It's got a decent range, 150 miles per tank. The tank sits very low. It's right here. The seat, you can lift it up and you can store 2 full-size helmets under the seat, which is good in a maxi scooter. The seat is extremely wide, especially towards the back. It's also got lumbar support, and it's got lumbar support for the passenger as well, and an extremely wide seat. You would think that a maxi scooter would be overly wide, and most are, but the way Honda designed this is that they made it so narrow here that you can flat foot this bike very easily, and then they shaped the seat down towards the front to be extremely narrow. Large single rotor up front, ABS standard, 14-inch front wheel, agile for what it is. It's got a long wheelbase, but it stops pretty well. The brakes are excellent on it. Up front, you have a 14 size tire, and you also have 1 rotor up front. This one comes standard with ABS. Up front, you have a very contemporary looking, even now, the front end of the Silverwing is extremely modern. I don't think a lot of people realize that this is a 20-year-old historic bike. Looking at it, everything is streamlined. You have a V-shaped headlight with a high beam and a low beam, so it's stacked up. In a way, it looks very much like a Hayabusa. The way it looks from the front, it looks like a modern large sport bike. If you're looking at this bike head on, you think it's a motorcycle instead of a scooter. That's how the styling is from the front. It also has integrated signals, and it is nice to have signals that are this large. You know, the seat is extremely comfortable. When you first initially sit on it, you do not have any issues reaching the ground because the shape of the seat here is cut in such a way that it's very easy to put your thighs on it. And then you can kind of just move towards the back. The lumbar support is extremely good on this bike. As soon as you sit on it, it feels like it's giving you a little bit of an edge. It is adjustable. I believe it's got a 3-way position for the adjustability by pushing up the seat and fixing that. The passenger seat also has a lumbar support. And this is the stock seat, so it hasn't been refurbished or anything, and you can see how well it holds up over time. Honda streamlined this by having the passenger foot pegs tuck away neatly onto the side. And they made a little bit of a lip here, so you can put your fingers, just kind of do that. The driver has 2 unique positions for putting his foot. You could either put your foot here, or you can put your foot here. And you can kind of vary it for being comfortable. While I do have to admit that I do not find the position for the feet to be comfortable for my type of body, I feel that your legs are more natural extended than having your legs here. In the rear, you have a 150 size 13, so different sizes for the front and rear. It's a very simple system. You have 2 coils for the suspension. They are adjustable. You have to use a special tool to move them, but it is absolutely pretty soft. On this bike, you have the gas tank down here. The gas tank, you have to use the key. You have to put the key in and turn it and then do this and have this kind of lugging around. I kind of wish that Honda stopped doing this with their bikes. Nice thing is that the gas tank sits very low to the ground, so the center of gravity is much lower. This bike doesn't have overly fancy electronics. Remember, at the time, 2003, this bike was very modern, but now, in a way, this resembles a budget bike of today. They're still making bikes that have that budget-oriented look, and even the CB500s, very similar in styling. A plastic covering for the handlebars. What I like about this is that the handlebars do have the ability of, you can mount a GPS on here. A lot of scooters have a lot of plastic hiding the controls, and you can't really mount a GPS. This one, you could remove parts and put it on there. This is the brake, front brake. This is the rear and the front. The braking system on this is interesting because on this one, you hit this, you're going to hit the rear and the front at the same time because it is using Honda's linked braking system. This one has got a front brake only, and it dives in a little bit when you pull it. You have your high beams, you have your turn signals, canceling is pushing in, and your horn. Very simple, and of course you have your brake. One thing I have to note is that Honda skipped a little bit with the design by putting these stock type of mirrors. They should have integrated this into the bodywork of the bike, much like what they did with the ST1300. These look very cheap, and I think that it throws the styling off just a little bit. On the left side, you have a compartment. This is very typical of like Honda. They do this with the ST1300 as well, ST1100. You have a lockable compartment, and this thing doesn't open very far, but it is huge. As a matter of fact, I have my owner's manual in here, and if you notice my hand going in, this goes on almost to the middle of my arm, actually over the middle. You have a non-lockable compartment, so this is good to kind of throw your phone in when you're riding, and your wallet, and you can just push it in to close it. Very simple. Right over here, you have something that you might not even see. As you're riding, you don't see this at all. This is your handbrake. Very simple system. Dual exhaust. It's a single with a dual tip exhaust. In the rear, you have this amount of space that kind of comes back, and that's going to make sense in a little bit when we look at the under storage compartment. You have signals integrated onto the sides, extremely well designed in the back. It doesn't seem like it's weirdly large and bulgy. You have the logo of Honda right here, proudly announced. And this shape means that you can store 2 helmets inside the compartment. Often you see this in Honda. It's very unique design. This is the brake light, but it blends in with the bodywork of the body. So in a way, this is like such a well-designed taillight that sometimes you can barely see it. If you're just standing around and you are wondering what the taillight is, you might not even see it because you see the 2 turn signals, but this is so flush with the plastic. To open the compartment, you have to put the key here. It's not keyless, and you just flip up. You turn the seat up. It's got an hydraulic arm that holds it up, really excellent. The helmets, everything kind of fits in here. You have access to the battery and the fuses. You can fit 2 entire full-size helmets inside of here. And the reason the tail kind of bulges out is because this goes on. You can put another helmet back here, another one here. And over here you have access to your fuses on both this side, and you have your toolkit tucked away right here. On the left side of the compartment, you have your battery. So this is what the bike looks like with the lights on. Very quiet, high beams, low beams, turn signals. Very cool looking bike. It's very hard to believe that this is an historic bike. It doesn't seem like it should be an historic bike because the styling is still extremely contemporary. It looks modern. And I think that has to do because Honda at this time was still producing motorcycles that had quite a bit of production value. Only lately they started skimping on materials and making things a little bit too generalized with their engines. The bike itself looks very aerodynamic, and when you're sitting on it, this is a perfect winter bike because the wind protection is just so good on it. It does have a little bit of a grumble in the beginning of the rev range, and it sounds exciting for a scooter, but as soon as you start moving, it's very linear and it feels very much like a scooter. The dash on this bike is extremely simple. They don't have much, so this is your tachometer, and it's an oval shape. They repeated this oval shape throughout the entire bike. In the middle, that's your speedometer. The digital side has fuel gauge on the left and your temperature on the right, and then you have some dummy lights like the oil light, the temperature in case the engine overheats. You also have the time up on the top, and then you have a trip. The trip only has one or two features, so trip A, trip B, and then you have your odometer. The odometer has 21,953 miles, so not a lot for a Silverwing. Down here you have your typical dummy lights with two buttons. This feature is interesting because this lets fresh air come onto the bike. This is the first time I've had this sort of system, and it is nice. But this windscreen in the summertime, it's an aftermarket one. It's made by clearviewshields.com. It is very effective, and in a way, it's too large, I think, for me, so I'm probably gonna put the stock one on here. Well, this bike is a 600cc bike. It really is a 582cc bike. It's a 4-valve EFI DOHC parallel twin. The wheelbase is pretty large at 62.8 inches, and the seat height is very low for such a big bike with 29.7 inches of height. The dry weight is 511 pounds, and the wet weight is 551 pounds wet. The fuel capacity is 4.2 US gallons and 0.9 US gallons for reserved. So here is the time you guys have been waiting for, the ride on the Honda Silverwing. So this is a great bike, and the best thing is also you get great deals in the used market. So I got the kickstand on, so if you get on the bike, if you leave the kickstand on, it will not start. So if you push the kickstand up, hold the left handbrake, and then start it, it fires right up without any issue. It has the ABS light on, but as soon as you start moving, it disappears. So when you look at the bike, it is very narrow here. See how my legs kind of go inside here, but you actually put your foot here. They did this in a way, it's a very distinct style because shorter riders can fit this bike and flat-footed. And I didn't think that, because oftentimes like they'll have like a large board, it'll be kind of flat, so if I had to do this, it'll be a little bit more of a struggle to flat-foot. But this, you can be a little bit shorter and flat-footed. So this is your handbrake. Oh, there we go, handbrake. And the bike is very smooth, and it takes off extremely well. Like it's not a overly fast bike. It is just extremely smooth. Honda made this bike smooth because it appeals to riders that want something that's easy to ride every single day. You don't get this bike to save money on gas because a large maxi scooter is just simply not that good on gas. A smaller 250 might get you 70-80 miles to the gallon. A 200 or 150 might get you 90. This one, in its best, probably will get you 50, but I think it's closer to 42, 45 miles to the gallon. But like I said, the people that get the Silverwing are not the people that are saving money on gas. These are people that want refinement. So I've been riding the Silverwing for a while, and there's a couple of things that bother me, as per usual. I think the biggest one is really the miles per gallon, but that's not really a fault of the bike. I should have known that it doesn't get great mileage. And you know, the people that get this bike aren't really concerned about mileage. This is just simply probably one of the more sophisticated balanced bikes. I was looking at the Burgman 650 as opposed to this, because the Burgman 650 represents a little bit more luxury when it comes to maxi scooters. The cool thing about the Silverwing is that for some reason it was made in such a way that you can ride it every single day and it looks much more streamlined. The Burgman feels almost like a car. It's extremely big and wide. This one doesn't feel like that. And it doesn't feel like that especially from the driver's seat, because it kind of tapers off the way they styled it. You know, one of the interesting things about Honda engineering is that it almost feels like sorcery. When you take the Goldwing, for example, that bike hides its weight so well that it feels like a 600cc motorcycle with the engine really low to the ground. For a manufacturer like Honda that makes very conservative cars, their motorcycles are very ahead of its time. Even a bike that a lot of people don't like, which is the NC700 and NC750X, that bike is an amazing feat of engineering. Perhaps not the type of engineering that wins races, but they do their best to make a bike that's a commuter with that one, and it's probably one of the best commuters. I keep thinking, like, I want to shift it, but this bike is just not a shifter. You know, on the highway, this bike is probably better than what you'd expect. You know, it's not a uber fast bike, and I found that going 60 miles per hour is exactly the sweet spot of this bike, 60, 65. But it seems that most 600s have that. You don't want to be going too fast on the highway on a 600. At least it doesn't feel like it's a natural RPM for the engine. But right now, 70 miles an hour, it's perfect. At 45 miles per hour on the highway, this thing is at 4,000 RPMs. At 60 miles per hour, it's at 4.9 thousand RPMs. So it revs kind of high, and that's the reason this thing uses quite a bit of more fuel than a comparable motorcycle. Look at this. This Jeep is using this Jeep to like do stuff. I thought you only drove these things to Starbucks. In these type of roads, it's excellent. They're not too fast, they're not too slow, and the bike goes around corners surprisingly well, because the weight is just so down low, and it's extremely smooth as well. With its long wheelbase, it makes the bike much more stable. And it's got plenty of power. You're not going to get any wheel spin or wheelies on this. Honda made sure that this thing doesn't do any wheelies or burnouts. It's also got the link braking that Honda is famous for, and that's an acquired taste, but it does make the bike very safe. When you apply the left lever, it applies the rear and the front at the same time, and of course the one on the right is just a front brake. The brakes are adequate because the bike itself is not extremely fast, but it is a bike that is completely able to do highway. On a hot day, this bike is extremely hot because there's so much wind protection to this thing. And the windscreen, this one is an aftermarket one, so it's even better for wind protection. The owner was a full-time commuter, so this is what happens when you get a full-time commuter. You get a windscreen. That's a hack, because in the winter you want to be able to get all that cold away from you. It puts a lot of weight on your bum, so for me, after a while, it actually tires me out quite a bit. So 140 miles, it feels like I've done more miles. But from 0 to like 80 miles, it's like sheer comfort. It is like I'm riding a recliner. Another con is that this bike is not really a great commuter for major cities. It is and it isn't. Like, the reason I think it's not a great commuter, especially in the DC metro area, is that there's too much traffic. This is a hot bike and it's also extremely wide, so lane splitting is an issue. On the West Coast, California, yeah, you can split lanes because it seems like the lanes are wider. East Coast, very difficult to get around. Another con is that this bike is heavy. You don't really feel the weight as much, but it is heavy. When you move it in the garage, you will feel that weight. And it's pretty typical of a Honda. As soon as you start moving, that weight disappears almost entirely. One of the really amazing things about this bike, this is 2003. This is considered an historic motorcycle. It makes you a more relaxed rider. You know, one of my problems with riding a motorcycle is that I tend to be a little bit on the aggressive side, hence the reckless speeding tickets I've gotten. And I really enjoy the power, but I also enjoy touring and exploring, and this thing just kind of lets you explore something without having the need to go fast. When you roll up to a stop sign, you hit that left brake. The bike doesn't dive because you're applying both brakes at the same time. But if you use the front, look at that, it dives in quite a bit. It takes a while to get used to the cornering of this bike, but it handles extremely well for what it is. This is pretty much full throttle. For a squirrel, hey, see, good brakes. It's very comfortable for the rider and the passenger. I rode with a passenger and she thought that this bike was extremely comfortable, and it is because both the rider and the passenger have lumbar support. On a bike like this, you can go out of state, you can go 200 miles, 300 miles a day. When you have a scooter like a 150, like an SH 150, you're not going to do that. But this one lets you. It might not be the fastest scooter around, but it carries the speed the same as a car, so you can go on the highway, you can take big roads, big side roads without having to fear for going too slow, or whenever a hill comes up, you're not going to lose any speed. On a smaller bike, yeah, that's possible. Like a 150, you go up a big mountain pass, you're slowing down. On this, yeah, no chances of that. It's torquey, it's very powerful for what it is. It can carry 2 passengers very comfortably. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed the Honda Silverwing review. It's a great motorcycle, and a lot of people might not want a maxi scooter, but if you're interested in getting a touring bike, I would seriously consider a 400cc to 600cc maxi scooter like this. They can make your ride much more comfortable. They are very easy to use. They're very maintenance free with their drive belts, with the CVTs, and quite frankly, I like the stealthiness of a scooter. Scooters are great for city riding, but this one is specifically good because it adds a different element, specifically touring, to the fray. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.